Hello, everyone. This is the Drone Dialogues, aka Drone News. The podcast hasn't quite started yet, but due to some recent interactions with gun Twitter and sort of some hearing some rumors and stuff about future firearm laws, and not being able to really speak as an expert, I figured I'd bring in an expert. And we're not talking some ninja, like we often see. And I think that this is part of the reason why I'm kicking off not with the true podcast, but with just an interview with a great expert that I've known for almost 44 years. As you know me, I go by Rick the Dad on X, and I am starting this podcast with a friend of mine, long-term friend named Stu, who we will get around doing regular podcasts soon. But before that, the drone dialogues, whatever you want to call us, drone news, we are having an interview with an expert. And this segment is called Technical, or did we say tactical and technical? What did we agree on?
Technical and regulatory compliance.
Okay, but our little once a month thing is technical and tactical, or tactical and technical. We'll figure it out later.
Either either way.
Yeah, technical and tactical with Rick and Rick, because I'm Rick Vasquez, he's Rick Vasquez, and he just so happens to be my father, even though he has zero resemblance. So these are we had already discussed talking points before we did this, but I obviously don't. We don't want to sound like robots. We want to talk about people who both have now. Now, Dad, you have both technical and tactical knowledge. I have mostly tactical. The slight technical is only stuff I've, learned from you. Whenever watching him in the garage, tell some of the stuff you used to work on in the garage, just so they have an idea.
Well, as I'm also a licensed manufacturer, I retired from ATF as the chief technical expert for all of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And I started my own consultant business. But one thing I've always done, I was a gunsmith for the Marine Corps, and I have always had a gun business. So I built the variations of the Marine Corps sniper rifle for several government agencies, several police departments, and I can't tell you how many special agents from these different law enforcement departments have some of my firearms. Also, really high-end 1911s and just a variety of different guns. I've always had a small machine shop set up in my garage to do all the work myself. And now that I'm an advisor to the firearms industry, I do this for many of the major firearm companies, and I won't mention any names. And I do it in the capacity to help them ensure when they want to import a firearm that it meets the importation requirements, which that's a whole different subject we can talk about later on, or it meets the requirements that ATF sets where it can't be converted to a machine gun, where it's a semi-automatic, a pump, or stuff to that effect. And especially lately with the bump stock and the arm brace, all of those issues have been on my desktop, and I've worked with anybody and everybody who's working on those issues in the public today.
Now, just because it sort of piqued my ears, and I think it piques a lot of people's ears. We often interact with people who are going through lawsuits with the government. Oftentimes when they bring up gun bump stock policy, you're the guy because your name's on the document, correct?
I wrote the first declaration for MAC, the Military Arms Channel. They were the first people to sue ATF, and I worked with the Gun Owners of America, and we actually won the first bump stock case, but then it was overturned in a higher court. So my declaration has floated through all of the practices that are using bump stock. I worked on a case in Houston where the charges were immediately dropped once they saw that I was going to come in and testify on behalf of the individual that had a bump stock. Now, let me be clear when I talk about testifying on behalf of individuals. I'm not testifying on behalf of the drug dealer or the guy who breaks into a store. I'm testifying on behalf of these frivolous lawsuits that are being brought against honest citizens and honest gun dealers. And those are the people that I am testifying on against the government.
So if you had a lawyer call you and he said, I don't know, I'm not going to use any stereotypical names, but I've got John Adams here, and he smoked his wife with a bump stock. We want you to defend him. You're like, go pee up a rope. I don't want to talk to you, right?
And I'll use, since I'm Mexican, I always use my own stereotypical, as you know,
Yeah.
my nickname is the Mexican, and I'm very proud of that. If Jose or Juan takes a bump stock and smokes a neighborhood, I'm going to do everything in my power to work for the government to testify against these individuals.
Okay.
We work for, like I said, the honest citizen, the honest gun dealer. For some reason, gets trapped up into some of these prosecutions, and we'll support them as much as we can.
Okay, so something we had sort of discussed is like, and I guess we'll get to this at the tail end of the conversation. We're not going to talk about the morality of the ATF as an agency. You know, you worked for them. I briefly subcontracted for them for, a cup of coffee amount of time. Um, I I don't have a love for the agency. I don't have a hate, but they are an agency that exists, and they, like any other law enforcement agency, they want to make arrests because it gives them good stats at the end of the year when they want to get a bonus. That's just a reality of law enforcement, regardless of the agency you work in. I worked in law enforcement for 7 years, and I got bonuses based off of seizures or helping people get better at firearms, etc. So that's a reality of the job. We're not going to argue yet about the morality of the existence of the ATF, the problems, the good things, the bad, whatever. I mean, and when people say ATF and their complaints, they're generally talking about the firearms aspect, which is what you were involved in. So one thing you were involved in was FFLs. Now, could you explain to the layman listener or the guy who just goes to the range what an FFL is, and what you wanted to talk about is how to make sure you don't get violated?
Yeah, it's going to take me a little bit of time, and I'm going to get into this not too in depth, but to make sure that everybody understands their responsibility. Uh, ATF is the agency that regulates firearms. They regulate the firearms industry and anybody who has a federal firearms licensee. Now, there's a wide variety of federal firearms licenses. There's a dealer, manufacturer, importer, importer of destructive devices, importer of machine guns, manufacturer of machine guns, manufacturer of silencers. So if you're going to get a license just to be a dealer, that's called an O1 license. But you have responsibilities. The biggest talk that we see with the talking heads and some of the large groups that are supposedly supporting the firearms industry is they're putting 100% of the blame on ATF. And the reason that is very prevalent right now is under this administration, under this attorney general, ATF is being directed to take no leniency to any violations you have as a firearms dealer.
Okay, that's not surprising at all. But continue.
So, what gun dealers, so now I got to talk about the regulations before we go any further. And I'm going to use an analogy. If I open up a 7-Eleven tomorrow and I start selling cigarettes, cigars, beer, and liquor to a 12-year-old, there's not going to be a slap in the hand. I'm going to go to jail. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If I open up a pharmacy and I'm Joe Pharmacist and I'm selling those opiates out the back door to a 16-year-old kid, I'm going to jail. I'm going to lose my license. So FFLs, unfortunately, have not been trained properly and they have been conducting business basically by the skin of their teeth for years because the power of the politics on ATF is immense. So you have an administration that's in and it said, you leave firearms dealers alone. They can do what they want to as long as you don't catch them selling guns out the back door, then you're not going to do anything to them. Well, you have regulations to follow. I would venture to say that a vast majority of firearms, FFLs, federal firearms licensees, have never opened up the Federal Firearms Regulation Guide, the P5300.4. And it's only about a half inch thick, but that tells you everything that you're responsible for. And it's set up in sections. The first section is 921 is definitions. 922 is unlawful acts, meaning if you do something in 922, that's a felony. 923 is licensing. 924 is penalties and perjuries. You mess up in 922, 924 tells you how many years you're going to jail. 925 is exemptions. And 926, because I very seldom ever use it, don't remember the title, but it's kind of like the things that get added. For example, under 926, there's the exemption that anybody that is not prohibited can cross any state line with a firearm if he's going to another state that allows him the same right. So I'm going from Georgia to, let's say, Maine, and I have to drive through all the communist states, Maryland, New York, all of those. I got them in line. As long as I have that firearm locked up, unloaded, and I can't reach it, I can literally go through those states. And then when I get to Maine, I can take that firearm out because now we're back in a free state and I could use that prohibited firearm from the other Soviet republics. So those are in 926, things like that. What is your responsibility? Your responsibility is to know those regulations. I will tell you this. If you're a general dealer and all you do is sell guns, and I'll just use a couple of props here.
Okay.
And you have an A&D book and you have 4473s. And everybody should know what an A&D book is, acquisition and disposition law.
Okay.
And a gun dealer comes in, a gun purchaser comes in, you fill out the 4473 exactly the way it says. Everything's on there. You do a background check. Now you log it into your A&D book exactly the way it says in the timely manner. And what is the timely manner? By the end of the next business. You have to do these things. If you do that, you will never be in any trouble. It is literally that simple. But we all get in a rush. We don't do what we're supposed to do. I fill out a 4473. I forget to do the background check. That's a felony. That's an automatic loss of your license under this administration. One occurrence and you lose your license. So one of the things that I do also is I go to dealers, manufacturers, and I go through their books and make sure they're in order. And I'm going to tell you, it's a funny, but not so funny story. I was auditing a manufacturer and they had just come back from a gun show. So we went through a class. We do like 6-hour classes because they had manufacturing, NFA, you name it, they were doing it. We got done with the class. So, all right, let's start going through some 4473s and A&D book. And theirs was all electronic, which makes it very simple. So let's start with what you did this weekend. So we printed off all the 4473s from this weekend. And we started going through these things. And like 90% of them had not been signed. This is a signature. 90% of them didn't have the driver's license number on them. If ATF had walked in under this administration, even though they're regulatory, they had done the background check, those are severe violations. So we stopped the training, stopped the inspection, and we get everybody a stack of 4473s. And I'll never, under penalty of death, tell who this was. And all of these guys, so Joe had this many, Bob had this many, Jolene had this many. They didn't make one phone call. They drove to those purchases houses. Some of them had to drive 3 hours. They drove, and we got those 4473s corrected. We were not going to pick up the phone because we all have done it. Somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, sir, you owe us an additional $10. You didn't fill this out correctly. I'll get to you next week. I'll do it next week." Well, just with their luck, ATF would have showed it the next day. We got every single 4473 corrected completely, got back. That individual was fired because he was just doing any gun work. And then we progressed with our inspection of their books. Lo and behold, a month later, they get an inspection. And this is an absolute true story. That's why I'm not mentioning names. They're a big manufacturer of silencers, machine guns, and understanding what they have to do is very difficult. The inspectors from ATF had to ask them what the right way was. So I had come in there and instructed them, got everything perfect, and they had an almost perfect inspection. It's very hard to get a perfect inspection because everybody has administrative errors, and you can have a regulatory error that is not a kiss of death. But when you start failing to do a background check, failing to get signatures, falsifying 4473s, straw purchases, you're going to lose your license. It's not a matter of, I may lose my license. Just start packing up your stuff and get it ready to go into ATF because you're going to lose your license.
Yeah.
For example, if I do a falsify a documentation, that's a felony. Now, if you want to fight and go to court, and the U.S. attorney takes that case and they stand up in front of a jury and said, "Did you do this?" I'm making it very simple. Yes. What does the jurors hear? He did that on purpose. So you are going to be convicted of a felony. That's why so many people arbitrarily turn their license in once ATF catches them, because you don't want to go to court. Plus, it costs a phenomenal amount of money to fight the government.
And the other
So
thing
those
is you know, our government may be approaching $40 trillion in debt, but they always find money to, prosecute people who aren't even big fish because once again, it goes back to this needs to be emphasized. You can think of government workers as whatever epithet you want to use. To some to some extent, they are still human beings. If they see you Fed posting and said, "Yeah, come and take it," I saw someone, and I won't call it names. He's a pretty popular person in the community in the industry. Say, something to the effect of, "Voting isn't going to fix this." It's like there's a lot of speech out there that proposes violence as the action, but if you can stay within the legal parameters of what the ATF and the government, DOJ, requires, up until you can get the right legislators in office, then do your best to stay within that. And that's kind of what, that's kind of the gist of what you're saying, Dad, right? Is like we don't none of us like this system. But I I'll speak this little anecdote. My father and I have been in situations where there have been people who have been getting all high and mighty about my father's former profession. And I've said this. I said, if anything, my dad's time in the ATF probably was more pro firearm than anti firearm. It's not like you were a mole, but you would try to interpret the law in a way that benefited firearms owners.
what we would do is, I had a very fixed job. I worked within these two walls, and they were black and white. And we would look at those black and white and make sure that we weren't jumping the left side. And that's a perfect analogy, left and the right. We got the left side that's liberals and the right side that's a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
So we made sure that those interpretations weren't going one way or the other. And we made a lot of good decisions when I was there. There's a lot of good decisions being made today. But I don't want to get into the weeds of politics. Under
Yeah.
this administration, there's people in ATF, their senior executives are retiring as fast as they can because this administration is not allowing them to go out and get it a real crime. They're going into the administrative crime, which the inspectors should be doing, not the agents. But we talked about regulatory. So now I just hit on this lightly. I have an FFL. It is absolutely my responsibility to follow the regulations. In this past year, we've had the arm brace regulation, the bump stock, which has been a couple of years, the 80% receiver rule, the which along with parts kits rule. This came out yesterday. 19 pages. 19 pages. This is the Q&A that you can download offline. 19 pages on the new rule on what is a dealer.
Hey, Dad, I have a quick interruption though. That if you got, 19 pages is a lot when you need to get out there an angry tweet. You know what I mean? So, I mean, and anyone who listens to this is my little aside. I love tweeting. I probably tweet too much, but the rest of the day I'm doing other things. If I'm tweeting, I'm probably like, not TMI, I'm probably in the bathroom. You know, you got other things to do, other priorities. And as much as we like to make memes and challenge people and accuse people of being on the other side, the simple fact is, if you're doing that, first of all, if you're saying certain things, the ATF are investigators, as are the FBI. You say stuff that, once again, human beings, if they decide, you know what, this guy said I was a worthless, I work for the ATF and I'm a good person. I wonder what his name is. I bet I can find it out and send the inspectors. And maybe I'll violate him, maybe I'm not, but I'll make his life a hard time. So this is also about, let's make a way so that your life doesn't become a hard time. Read
Absolutely.
read the 19 pages. It might take you an hour. It might take you 2 hours if you're Mexicans like us. But read it.
You should have binders of every single thing you received so that when you have a question, you can say, what does it mean to be a dealer? What does it mean to be a parts hit gun? And you pull that out and you look, if you have questions, call your local ATF regulators. Now, I'm a compliance expert. I talk to people all the time, but I charge for what I do.
Yeah.
I do a lot of stuff online for free. I will tell you this, and I said I'm not going to mention any names. These major firearms lobby groups that we have are taking a lot of money, and I mean millions and millions of dollars, to pay extremely large salaries to produce very little for the actual firearms owner. There are some small compliance experts out there. I recommend you spend the money and go to them and utilize them. Of course, I'm out there, but there's other people as well. But I will tell you this, and I've had discussions. I've been told by some of these organizations that I need to quit supporting some of these issues because it's distracting from what they're doing, which, other than collecting money, I don't know what they're doing. They claim they're lobbying, but we still got a 19-page rule on what is manufacturing, and they collected a lot of money to go lobby Congress. Why did this still come out?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But take care of yourself, read the regulations, talk to your ATF regulators, and save everything that you can to ensure that you're staying up on top of things. If you're a basic dealer and you're doing the basic things that the guidebook tells you what to do, if you go online with ATF, there's Q's and A's for everything. There's your best practices. There's a 5300.4 Firearms Regulation Guide. There's a 19 pages on what's a dealer. There's all the rulings that came out. and they don't affect. Generally, these major rulings are affecting the manufacturers, not the regular dealer,
Hmm.
because the majority of the dealers I know that set up at gun shows, hey, Joe, that sets up there every single month and sells $20 or $30, and he has a sign there that says, "I don't require background checks. Come see me." I'm sitting over here selling guns as a profession, and I have to do a background check. Well, John over there is not doing background checks, so he's hurting my income. So the majority of gun dealers at gun shows do not like these individuals setting up and taking away their money.
Yeah. Okay, so you had sent me a list to look at of the most frequently cited violations, and I'm just going to go ahead and read those
Yeah,
off real
just
quick.
read those off, please.
And these all fall under 27 CFR, which is public knowledge. You can look these up. We have 478.125 Echo as failure to maintain an accurate, completely timely acquisition and disposition record of firearms, which you had previously mentioned.
After every one, I'm just going to throw a few words in.
Okay, yeah.
You sell a gun, or you get a gun in, you get a cup of coffee, go smoke a cigarette. I'll log it in tomorrow. 2 weeks from now, you can't even find a gun because you didn't log it in and don't know where it is. Do it immediately. Don't wait till tomorrow.
And this is why, and people complain about this. This is part of why, whenever you're waiting for a background check, and you're like, man, why is this taking so long? It's probably because if it's one guy working at the shop and one guy doing everything, he's probably logging it in right then.
Absolutely.
And because I have purchased in person, I believe 3 or 4 firearms in my entire life. I have been at those shops anywhere from a half hour to an hour and a half, and that's what I guess is someone's documenting it. The number one is 27. Oh, this sorry, we said they're all 27 CFR. A 478.124 C1 failure to obtain a completed ATF F4473, and you had mentioned that earlier, I believe.
Yeah, the 4473, whether we agree with the government or not, that is used to show who bought the firearm. And if you've been in business a long time, you've gotten a call sooner or later said, hey, we need to come pull the 4473 for Rick Vasquez, senior. Um, this this gun was used in this. They won't even tell you. They just need to come pull that gun. And nowadays, they'll actually pull fingerprints and sometimes DNA off those 4473s.
Mm-hmm.
So the 4473 now, most of them are electronic, so you're not going to get fingerprints off of them. But they document who was the last person who bought that firearm in a commercial status.
Okay. Okay. So then we have 478.21 alpha failure to complete forms as prescribed. I mean, that doesn't really need any more
Well,
explanation. You just didn't fill
there's
out the
other
forms right.
forms. That's the 4473, the A&D book, and the multiple cells. If a person buys more than 2 pistols in a 5-day period, you have to submit a multiple cells. Guys, dealers screw that up all the time. They're always forgetting to do it. They don't document it, and then it's an easy violation to ATF to put on you.
Yeah, and then I see some other ones. Um, we have after that we have C4, C3, C5, which all apply to the 4473, which is basically it boils down to verifying, recording, and for a transfer. So it's all, I mean, documentation. You know, I'm sure you heard it in the government and the military. They, um, you know, just just document everything you do. And if you're not, like you said, don't go out for a coffee and a cigarette. Sit down there and do it. And it ties into the tactical side also. Getting a gun, you train. You train. You put hours in. If you're selling guns, you put hours in. You put hours to make sure that you've covered your anatomy, as we say. You know, Uh, document everything as it comes in. Don't prioritize. Like me, I would love to, instead of doing this podcast, I would love to be live streaming a video game on Twitch or playing a board game or if the kid was awake, be going on a run. But hey, at least it keeps you from cleaning the house. So I think that's something that needs to be emphasized. If you're in the firearms industry, if you're and even if by that if you're in firearms at all, if you own a 22 long rifle that you shoot rabbits with, it's all about putting the time in. And if you don't put the time in, don't start a business. Have someone else start the business. And if you can't find a way to comply, like you said, give up your license. Just don't do it.
How many more we got to go through?
We got failure to maintain an accurate, completely timely manufacture or acquisition record.
Once again, manufacturers have more regulations. And when we think of manufacturer, don't just think about the person who gets a square block of steel and cuts it into a frame or receiver. Manufacturing, because of the tax code, also is I buy a 1911 receiver, and now I've loaded into my A&D book, but then I put a new slide, a new barrel, new sights. I've manufactured a new and different firearm. So now I have record keeping requirements for those. I have marking requirements. And a lot of people literally do not understand that, even though that's been a requirement for, God, since 1968. So you have tax requirements, excise tax requirements when you make a new firearm. And so people go years without knowing that they were supposed to mark these firearms, and years without knowing that they had to pay taxes on these firearms that they made from a different firearm.
Okay. Is there any so because obviously, I mean, I'm gonna leave the comments section open when I post this, and I'm sure we're gonna get some, don't listen to this guy. He's probably still a Fed. He probably has the, you know,
Well, we won't worry about that. Let them comment what they want.
yeah. So I'll just get to the question. Um, you hear the phrase abolish the ATF. Okay, now when you hear phrases like that, you probably just snicker. So I guess let's pre-answer some stuff. Do you think that there is a regulatory role that should keep the ATF in business, should keep them existing as a government agency and not a quote unquote violator of rights, as many 2A advocates would say?
Well, that's two ways to answer that.
Okay.
If you answer it as the 2A hardliners, there should never be any regulations on firearms whatsoever.
Yeah.
Just anybody buy a firearm, machine gun, bomb, silencer, grenade, and you can just do what you want with it.
Okay.
Now, and there's those people that believe that. Now, when it comes to regulations, you better hope that the ATF is not abolished. You know why? The FBI will take it over. And I'm telling you right now, if the FBI takes over firearms, you think you're getting things shoved up your poo-poo right now? They have 10 times the manpower, 20 times the budget, and they are politically driven. So if ATF is gone and the FBI takes over, there will be some immediate closings of firearms dealers. I personally think, this is just me personally, think that firearms should be regulated.
Okay.
In some manner, some capacity. I do not think it should be regulated the way it's going today, but if it was regulated the way it started out in 1968, then I think we would be fine.
So I know an anecdote that people often use is like, oh, back in the 19 whatever, I could go in the Sears catalog and order a Thompson submachine gun, stuff like that. So, I mean, I mean, but I think even within that, just because that was once a reality doesn't mean there wasn't regulation, you know?
Well, prior to 1934, we had commerce regulations, and that was kind of the regulations that was affected firearms. And of course, bad guys got the machine guns, and that's why the 1934 the National Firearms Act was passed. And it didn't take machine guns away from us; it regulated them with a $200 transfer tax, which is still in effect today. What took machine guns away from us under Reagan, and that's what happens. Everybody talks about the Democrats under Reagan in 1986. The FOPA Firearms Owners Protection Act was passed, and part of that was that no new machine guns could be sold to the public. So any machine gun that was registered prior to that date, May 19th of 1986, became immediately valuable. Where you could buy an M16 in 1965 for about $800. Today they range from $15,000 to $60,000, and basically only people with a lot of collector money own
Yeah.
transferable machine guns. So we're kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but this is important. So what I could do, since I have a Type 7 manufacturer's license, I could apply for my Class 2 manufacturer's SOT, and I could make my own machine guns. Now, I'm making those machine guns not for personal use, not for personal use. The law says I can manufacture machine guns for stockpile for future sales to law enforcement and military. But once I have those machine guns that go out and, like the vacuum cleaner salesman, go from police department to police department and say, hey, you want to buy machine guns? Well, I got them on the shelf. Well, I can go shoot them. I can rent them. I can do a lot of different things. And so a lot of people today that are dealers are getting their manufacturer's license and their SOT for the simple reason they can make machine guns and have them to shoot.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a way around it, but not really a way around it.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even call that a loophole because that's completely within the legal process.
That is correct. It's
Yeah,
completely in the law.
yeah. I, and I guess that was sort of, you know, all right. Let's cover this last subject. And it's something I talked to you about and we just laughed at the silliness of it. This is so we're done with the regulatory part. This is just Rick and Rick having some fun about some technical and tactical things. So, Dad, have you ever had a flashlight mounted to a firearm?
Yes and no.
Okay. So,
Now, and let me go ahead and tell you my side.
okay.
As a firearms instructor for Diplomatic Security Service, we taught the special agents every method of firearms and flashlight technique there was, so they could pick the flashlight. And when flashlights first started getting used attached to handguns, there weren't integrated rails. I remember when I was at Quantico, Virginia, we were drilling and tapping the bottoms of MP5 handguards, mounting flashlights to them, 1911s for all the special ops guys. There's all kinds of tricks. And the technique was to turn your light on when you thought you were going to shoot somebody. You didn't have a permanent light. Well, the biggest technique back in that day, especially during the day of revolvers, is the law enforcement officer would hold a flashlight in one hand and the pistol in the other hand. And the technique was that reason that was so popular that has been lost in this new technology of ninjaism is that the flashlight doesn't give your perfect location away. So if I shine the flashlight over here, I've got my gun over here, I'm shining it, I can sweep the room and still have my handgun up. So the evolution of flashlights is that you're you're nobody if you don't have a flashlight mounted to your gun.
So, so
And
it's so it's more of a cultural thing than a law enforcement thing. Like the 1990s mall ninja is now the 2020s gun guy, and he has to have every accessory out there so he can show how high speed and low drag he is.
Absolutely, and it seems the tactics being taught today is uh, it's jet black. There's 10 guys in the other room with guns aiming at you. Doesn't matter. You turn your flashlight on
You're a target.
and you walk into the room because that's what's being taught today.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that people lose track of is you never know when you're going to fight somebody as well trained as you or better trained than you.
Yeah.
So if you're going in there after Jose and Juan and Rick, and we just have guns that we bought the other day, yeah, you got a good advantage. But if you're ever going after some of these military veterans that have fought and killed a lot of people, and you walk in a door with a flashlight on, dude, you're going to be tuned up so fast it's unbelievable. Because if these guys have the willingness to kill, that's the only benefit in the United States is most people in the public do not have the willingness to kill a law enforcement officer. But we're seeing a change day by day by day. So my opinion, I don't have a flashlight on any of my guns,
Yeah.
and I have guns throughout the house. When I was doing training, I had a flashlight mounted on a gun strictly to train. But we showed all the different, hand holding techniques, side by side, everything, for the simple reason that we wanted them to think about how they were gonna use it and make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, having, I went through essentially two boot camps. Second one we shot pistol. They never that was FMSS, was kind of like a second boot camp, right? They taught us how to, be uh, do our sidearm when I was a corpsman, right? Nothing to do with flashlights. I don't even think we ever shot at night. CBP Academy. We never even. I don't. It's several years ago. I don't recall us ever even bringing out a flashlight. Anytime we trained with it with air marshals, and the air marshals are considered some of the best marksmen in the federal government. I was top gun of my academy, so I'm gonna toot my own horn here, and I'll and like between both of us, we have what? You're you've
I'm
got
a distinguished marksman.
yeah.
I've
So
set
I'm just saying,
records.
combined years, you and I have probably close to 100 years of firearms experience. Neither of us are quote unquote fuds. Um, uh, like obviously, I have zero firearms. That's a story for a different day. I have zero firearms now. Um, but I would say you and I have probably forgotten more about firearms than a lot of these guys with their podcasts and their little X followings have ever known. Um, be it in military, law enforcement, government, instruction. I mean, and me, the only instructing I ever did was helping everyone on my squad shoot as well as I did. And I will toot my horn on that, and because it's a simple fact. Like on the screen right now is the top is people who have been in the top percent of shooters, especially pistol, in the world. So like I'm not even going to try to talk us down and be humble about it. We both are historically excellent marksmen. So
I would say in law enforcement, not in the world.
well, speaking for myself, the entire world. So um, so I think it should, I remember, some guy makes a video and he's like, this is why you carry a flashlight. And the one thing I noticed, and I'll get to that part, but I have a question. A number, how many days a week do you go to the gym? How many days a week do you
Me,
work out?
4.
4, right? I work out minimum 4. Same thing. And if I'm not working out 4, it's because I'm spending an hour or two doing my lawn. I'm doing something. A lot of these guys you see like, oh, I'm gonna have a flashlight, and I look at them, and neither of us are thin guys, but we're both strong, but we're not thin. We could stand a little bit more, but they think about accessories on their guns. They're spending all day on the internet typing up what they would do when they would do. And these guys in these videos, a lot of them, I don't know if they could run a mile. You're pushing 70. I'm almost 44. I can run a mile. I can run a mile without stopping. You
Give
could.
me a couple of years. 68.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's something I think that, along with tactics, you need to be part of. The thing holding the weapon is what matters it to it also. And they focus so much on flashlights and, oh, the old guys say just buy a 1911. That only carries 8 bullets. Agreed. You know, I'm like, carry something with 13 rounds. That's fine, but um, go to the range, do your time. But if you're so focused on accessories, you're telling me you can't spend that time focusing on accessories, going on a 1 mile walk, hitting up the gym. And I think a lot of it, these guys, they think they're going to purchase that way into winning. They're purchase their way into winning a gunfight. So
Well, let's go ahead and kind of wrap up, cover what we covered, and then talk about what we're going to do in the future. This was kind, I would like to say, like a teaser. I covered some broad aspects of regulations,
yeah,
and we're going to narrow it down the next time. So we'll start talking about more narrow what a type one is, more narrow what a manufacturer has to do, and
yeah,
stuff like that. But I highly recommend, and I don't say highly, you need to get the regulations. You need to get all these rulings, and you need to, if this is going to be your future, and you plan on making a career out of selling or making firearms, don't be one of the people that show up on the internet or on TV. And we've seen many people, famous people, that are now prohibited persons because they didn't follow the rules of dealing in firearms.
yes,
So that's what you need to do. I hate all regulations. We all hate them.
yeah.
But guess what? Drink a 6 pack of beer and go driving down the road and hit somebody and see what happens to you. It's the same principle. This is your livelihood. Spend some time studying the regulations and make sure if ATF shows up, they walk out the door with nothing to put on you so you don't have to stress.
Well, and that sort of goes into this same, like, the goofy, like just an effort to connect this into the accessories things, right? Is you is it's it's not like you're just selling firearms. If you're selling firearms, you might be selling accessories. You might be selling all this stuff, right? You want to make sure that if you go out of business, you can't sell this stuff to your consumer. They can't be a advocate if all their local gun stores are shut down because of your idiocy. You can't make a buck off of them because you lost your license. You might, it, every time one of these shops is closed down, it's keeping someone who might want to get themselves into the industry, start the hobby. I know close to where I used to shoot, is less than a mile down from a gun shop. They have a very good relationship and they have stayed compliant for years and years. So we can complain about it on the internet, but instead of complaining about it on the internet, go read the regulations. And if and Dad, you'll probably agree with this. If you know someone who owns a gun shop and you see them slacking, be that friend who says, "Hey, you know what? You need to get your butt in gear, or we're not going to be able to go shoot together because you're going to be a felon. You're not going to be able to make a living because you lost your license." You know.
Sounds good to me.
All right. So you said you wanted to get a little more into the specifics next time, and I will try to think of some uh, tactical stuff that we can talk about and possibly make fun of because I love it when they call. Oh, I told my dad about this. They call people like him, who's, I just want to shoot a 1911. They call them FUDs, right? I had never heard this term till a year ago because I'm not really, um, I just, I recently got involved with, like, talking to people on gun Twitter and whatnot, and you know, um, I will ask one more question, Dad. If someone, this is this is sort of a broad question, but I would say with your history, it's something that and then we'll end with this question. If someone says, I've never shot a firearm, I, but I believe in 2A. I consider myself um, to support the rights of people to defend themselves. Constitutionally, I think we're doing the wrong thing. Uh, Going about purchasing a firearm is what I would like to do. What would you have? And just the first step. What's the first step you think they should do?
I would find a real firearms instructor. Now, I'm going to take this a little bit further.
Okay.
What I'm, if you go to a range and you pay $45 for an hour's class, you just gave $45 away. As you know, I had my own shooting school.
Mm-hmm.
I would take novices. I would provide the firearms. I would tell them, if you haven't bought a firearm, do not buy one. I would take them and we would spend 3 hours in the classroom. Now, I'm more expensive because it was 6 to 8 hours. 3 hours in the classroom. What is a gun? How does it operate? What's a trigger? What's the sights? How do you load it? Magazines, plastic rounds, on and on, these positions. Then we get them out to the range. They load 3 rounds in a magazine. Why? If I have a nervous person on the line, it's only 3 rounds. I can shoot it out. The other thing is, if I load 3 rounds with 15 magazines, I have to shoot 45 rounds to do 3 magazine changes. If I load 3 rounds with three magazines with 3 rounds apiece, I do 3 magazine changes with 9 rounds. So that repetition of teaching. So I would take them, like I said, to a real firearms instructor, recommend to go to one, and get some practice and use of the firearm, and then take them to a reputable dealer to buy the firearm. But practice and knowledge of the firearm should come first, unless they have a spouse or a brother or sister who says, no, I'm going to handle that.
Okay, and I guess that's kind of an interesting way to sum it up and bring back to the title of the series. Teach them the technical, and then get to the tactical. And uh, we've talked about this technical and tactical proficiency. Where does that you said the Marine Corps mentions that occasionally, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway,
Maybe not anymore, but in my day they did.
The technical way to get on hormones and the tactical way to conceal your junk until you do your transition, because that's the way the military's going.
All right. On that note,
Yeah. Hey, so guys, this has been the Drone Dialogues presents tactical and technical with Rick and Rick. Uh, Dad, just say your send off, and I'll send mine.
send in some questions so that we can prepare our next dialogue.
Okay, and I will also, if there are any links my dad wants to put in this, he can send them to me, and we will put it under the YouTube channel. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.